Kia ora, welcome everybody to this month's episode of Techbytes. I'm really excited to be speaking today about our Te Ara Hihiko mahi that we did last year. And I'm particularly excited about having Megan and Joe joining us this morning to talk through this. So let's just crack into it. So Megan, why don't you introduce yourself, what you do, a bit of background, and why you got involved in this mahi with Te Ara Hihiko?
Yep, ka pai, kia ora koutou. My name is Megan, and I'm currently the chair of Te Ara Hihiko by Tuans. And essentially, I've always worked in the energy and the digital sector. And when the opportunity came where I could deep dive into what I call something you're passionate about, which is the creating equity or understanding the challenges facing Māori and Pacifica within our sectors, and it was something I couldn't say no to. So that's why I got involved. Just purely, it's a real special place of passion for me.
Ka pai, ka pai. And Joe, really thrilled to have you here with us today.
Yeah, kia ora, tēnā koe, Craig, ko tira tēnā koe, Megan, and thanks for inviting me to join your podcast. This is a first for me. He oi, ko Joe McNaughton taku ingoa, e pakeke mai au I raro I te maru o tōku maunga, ko horohoro tērā, ko te arawa te iwi, ko Ngāti Tuara, te hapu. So I grew up in a little place called Horohoro, just out of Rotorua. My iwi is Te Arawa, and so yeah, just acknowledging that and both of you today. I work at BNZ, Bank of New Zealand, and I lead our Māori colleague strategy, which I describe as connecting Māori to opportunities at BNZ. There's not enough of us in banking, in the banking sector at BNZ, and BNZ is committed to increasing our representation in general, but also across leadership. Therefore, the mahi that Megan and you are doing have done across the Te Ara Hihiko program aligns squarely with my role at BNZ, and our commitment to nurturing a workplace where these rangatahi want to work, and we absolutely loved hosting them.
Amazing. Thanks so much for introducing yourselves. I mean, Te Ara Hihiko is a special place in our mahi. It was kicked off, nearly 2 years ago, and we've been through a few things. But today we're particularly focusing in on a pilot program that we did last year. And Megan, you took very much the lead on this with rangatahi at Pukekohe High. And the report that we wrote and released at the end of last year was called The Unfiltered Truth, which is a really useful and interesting title. But let's just take a step back and go, look, before this mahi began, generally those of us that are a bit older and look like me sort of assume that young people aren't interested in the industry because they might think it's uncool. And when you first started working with this panel, how did their feedback challenge those assumptions, and what did it reveal?
Look, it was that standard where we think our adult opinion, in particular in a corporate space, is fact and fiction. And it was fiction. We went to this rangatahi panel, and holy heck, we really got it wrong. The whole thing we got wrong. We assumed it was uncool. We have to make this industry, attractive for them to come in and even want to consider us. But actually, it was completely unsafe. All the feedback we received was that this is a male-dominated, white-dominated industry. It's too competitive. It's really unhealthy, really stressful. It wouldn't be welcoming of them. It wouldn't be inclusive of them. They'd be spoken down to. And this was exactly that unfiltered truth. They didn't even think about it before these words were coming out of their mouth. And that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted to know what their perception was. And unfortunately and fortunately, the perception was that it was an unsafe space for them to ever consider, let alone go down a career path in, where we just assumed it was uncool. So it was a massive eye-opener for us.
And that, do you see that coming through, Joe, when people come into the bank? Or is it, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but you've got the double whammy of technology and banking, which perhaps isn't seen as very cool either.
Yep. Yeah, and I think BNZ have identified already that we need to do something here. I think those assumptions, okay, either we're not cool or there's a skill gap, there's not enough talented people out there. I can understand where those assumptions come from, but I think what's important is that we have stopped and with through Megan's mahi in this report identified this gap between the rangatahi perspective and corporate perspective, and stop and actually, hey, let's do something about this, because yes, both tech and banking, we have the same challenge.
I just want to pull that out a little bit more, because the report does say that those of you that were facilitating the panel were, and it's a quote, stunned by the intensity of the feedback. So it wasn't just a throwaway comment, it was really quite important and deeply, felt. It was scary, condescending, competitive. So maybe we'll just go back to you, Megan, to start with. But like, from your experience of both facilitating the panel and hosting people in corporate spaces, because you have worked in corporate, why do you think these young Māori Pacifica students feel so strongly they wouldn't want to be wanted, or they wouldn't be wanted in their environment, might lack support?
Look, I think it's a couple of challenges that they see. One is the marketing that we do in Aotearoa that reflects Māori and Pacifica is often quite polished. So therefore, it's still not a true reflection authentically of what they think they look like or sound like or act like. So when they're seeing that, that still feels unreachable for them. And then outside of that, we're in a generation where all they're constantly doing is scrolling and being presented things on social media or streaming platforms. And again, when they're looking at anything that looks corporate, anything that looks tech and digital, it looks again too high level. It looks again very stressful, unwelcoming, not inclusive, and often, whether it be a movie or a program or something presenting on social media, it is always aimed at being in the negative light often as well. And for them, all they're seeing is that's not a space for me. That's unrealistically an option for me. It is not where I can go. And on top of that, my whānau is not going to support that, because that just doesn't make sense. Why would I even touch that space? So again, just a real psychologically unsafe space for them, and they're being reinforced that message on everything being presented to them in this day and age.
Yeah. And Joe, I suppose you react to that as well?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I'd love to add to that. I think there's a couple of parts here. One, we can be what we can see. And so from my experience, if these rangatahi have never seen themselves reflected in these spaces, then it's hard for them to imagine themselves in these spaces. Our biggest influences are our whānau and people we grow up with, our community. And the data tells us Māori Pacifica are underrepresented in these careers, so they don't have exposure to tech work stories and role models. Therefore, they're not being nurtured into those spaces. And then also to Megan's point, that influence of social media, I actually probably have no idea what they're looking at, but the role models or examples that they're seeing on social media probably don't resonate with them either. And also the piece around corporate imagery, how we turn up, is really important. And another thing that I'm seeing more organizations lean into is to be intentionally inclusive in our branding and how we turn up.
Yeah, I want to pull out a little bit more about whānau and family. Joe, you mentioned it, and Megan as well. But it wasn't just, we learnt through the reporting that it wasn't just the students who had reservations, but their whānau, and you mentioned it, Joe, often associate tech companies with bill pressure and stress. So this negative cycle at home is impacting them. So what can we do to help rebuild that trust and in the community? So do you want to go first, Joe, on that one?
Yeah, that is a really good point. And again, something that we face in banking. It's a reality. Whānau have historical bad experiences and that impacts their interactions with the organisations today, and leave a real sense of suspicion. And it reminds me of there's that saying around trust, it takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. So to rebuild that requires intentional action. So that's where programs like Te Ara Hihiko are super important, bringing that corporate and community together to just better understand where we're both at the moment.
Yeah. Megan, what were some of the specific things you heard from the rangatahi around their whānau and that stress that they felt?
Yeah, look, again, the good thing about us doing the rangatahi panel is it created a safe space for them to talk openly, because this wouldn't be something that would happen, say, if the whānau were present. So it was a really great way to gain these insights. And again, just tautoko to what Joe said as well, is they will only be what they can see, and they're not seeing this. So right within their whānau, their multi-generations have never, ever considered this sector. So on top of that, the only experiences they are having with this sector is a lack of education around it, a real difficulty understanding and connecting with it, right down to just if they can't understand their phone bill, they assume that that's associated with our sector, right? If their phone, their internet, or their power to their property is disconnected for whatever reason, they associate that with our sector. Even though energy is a completely different sector, for them, it's bill association and stress association within a household. And that comes down to fear. To be fair, whakamā, a bit of shame around that lack of educational understanding. Look, I'm sure all of us within our sector have had moments where we just think the language being spoken around the table is a whole different language, or try being an everyday consumer. We know it's difficult for an everyday consumer. So have one who's already had negative experiences, you're just not going to really stack up with them, let alone be something they promote or encourage. So even with our rangatahi within this space, there was moments where the DP, the deputy principal of Pukekohe High, would go into a house visit to actually really explain that this opportunity could be really impactful for their child. And it's because even though it was a free opportunity and obviously sounds really good, for them, the association to our sector was so strong in a negative light that just wasn't something they wanted their child to be touching or involved in or influenced by. Yeah.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because we're hearing from the rangatahi, but not the whānau themselves. And so that would be a really interesting thing to look into at some stage, but it could be quite tricky too, understanding what that is. Yeah.
It's just to add to that, it's a sensitive topic. Yeah. It is a sensitive topic for whānau. These rangatahi typically would need blessings of the elders, whether it be grandparents or parents, to follow any pathway. They will not challenge that. So I think it's something that we almost, instead of these career expos, which are brilliant, I get it, career expos or, marketing ploys, they're all fantastic, right? But we actually need to speak the same language at the same level in their safe space. And that might be going into their communities, into their churches, or into their kuras and having open conversation, the same as we did with rangatahi.
Well, the other thing that comes out with whānau as well is that people that look like me have a different cultural understanding of what they do with their kids and their expectations over their kids. I mean, you found, there are certain expectations on rangatahi when they finish school, for example. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what you found there?
Yeah, look, for a large proportion of New Zealand, our kids finish school and they follow their dreams or follow what they're influenced by. A lot of Māori and Pacifica, the first and foremost thing is, what are they going to do that makes their whānau proud? And second, probably equal with that, is the financial contribution into the household and the responsibility that puts on them, whether that be contributing to bills, or whether that be, for instance, I had a student that was taking the year off to work to pay towards her sister's student loan to help her parents pay that. So their responsibility and what they already have on their shoulders at a young age, and what they have to consider, is what a 45-year-old would have to consider. It's not stereotypical, but it is something we need to take into consideration when we're looking to bring them into our sector.
Yeah.
And if I could add to that, Craig, in terms of the level of responsibility, I think if I tie that into what we look for in recruitment, we've traditionally kind of taken or weighted heavily GPA, grade point average, they're getting, what grades are they getting? But if these rangatahi are studying and working full-time, and they're still achieving like a B average, that's incredible. And it's about telling that story, and not just looking at the GPA. There's a bigger picture. So one, telling that story, but also opening our minds to
acknowledging it, right? Acknowledging that that's a skill set in itself, what they're juggling.
Yeah, well, let's look at that, that when you're doing recruitment and hiring. I mean, the findings highlight that there are some significant cultural blind spots in standard hiring practices. We sort of know this, but it's come out again through here. So such as relying on the CV or the grades, as you said, Joe, or misinterpreting that your student, you talked about, Megan, taking a year off to pay someone else's student loan, we could look at it as disengagement, whereas actually they're doing something that's highly, contributive, etc. So, Megan, how do you think the industry needs to dismantle these recruitment systems or stop unfairly screening out what is promising diverse talent?
Look, we need to go from being paper first to people first. That's it in a nutshell. Our standard way of doing everything is, it's systematic, but it is culturally blind. It will dismiss them. I have been in situations in large corporations of New Zealand where I've seen firsthand CVs be dismissed because it just doesn't look pretty, or the name isn't something HR can say, or they put it next to another CV who's paper perfect, literally paper perfect, has everything you'd ever want. But you put them two side by side, sometimes the paper perfect can be the worst employee you get, and the one that has nothing will give you their all because they just wanted an opportunity. So I really believe we need to go beyond the tick box and look at the system. When we do system improvement, you unpick the whole lot, right? So you need to do recruitment improvement, unpick the whole lot from start to finish, and it goes right down to how is our application form noted, how's our advertisements done, is it in a language where these guys would actually understand that they can do this, they can fit this, is it inclusive to that? The people doing the hiring, are they culturally inclusive? Do they need training? Do they need uffie and some support in understanding what to look beyond? Because in my experience, when I've done this previously and I've flipped the recruitment process, and I gained in 30 that have all were dismissed by the SEEK process and the recruitment process, literally I'd say 96% of them were the best team we'd ever had as an organization. They outperformed 6 outsourcing businesses, and yet none of them had previous experience. All of them needed a lot more soft skill support, but they were the best, most loyal, dedicated team we'd ever experienced. So that's what we need to do within our spaces, is unpick it and make it a priority, not a burden. Why are we doing this? Is to gain talent that's going to give and give and give to us. That's why we need to do this.
It's a hard thing to hear, because particularly what you're questioning is management style, skills, but you're also questioning systems, and the systems have been put in place at large organizations like the bank, Joe. It's pretty difficult for you to go in. Well, I don't know, actually. I mean, this is up to you to say, but, how do people like yourself go to your HR team and go, we need to change this?
This is a great topic to kind of unpack. And I think I'm seeing things improve, but still we need to keep going. And to Megan's point, really look at our recruitment systems end to end. What are we how and where are we advertising? How do we assess merit? What's the success criteria, and whose definition are we using? And then selection. And I think this makes me think of a really great example that played out in public. And it's New Zealand Idol season 2. So yes, I think this is 20 years ago. There was a contestant who auditioned, a Pacifica wahine. She auditioned, and the two judges, one was Stacey Morrison, the other was a non-Māori Pacifica person. Their views of this person were completely different. On the one hand, you said, oh, no, she can't go through. Great voice, but terrible attitudes. She doesn't want to be here. She doesn't care. That's a no from me. But then Stacey Morrison, just has a completely different view. It's like, no, I see a vulnerable young person here who has probably taken a ton of courage to get here, audition. She's scared of being rejected. And yeah, so just completely different views. Anyway, get to the end of the story. This young wahine made it through and won. And it could have been a very different story. And we don't always have a Stacey Morrison in our selection process. But yeah.
And just to add, sorry, Craig, just to add to that one as well, what I've often found in the recruitment process is there's a lot of things we accept. So, for instance, working in a lot of recruitment, and we'd come across a lot of Russian, and they're bloody stunners. They're fantastic, absolutely fantastic at what they do. But often they've come across as quite direct within the recruitment process. But if you know the Russian culture, that's a typical thing. That's typically how they speak. It's how they present. It means nothing to their personality. Or their capability, but we say, you know what, that's what they're known for. That's okay. So I'll see past that. But we don't do that with Māori and Pacifica. When Māori and Pacifica come in and they might not give you that eye contact, or they talk quite quietly, and we view that as disengagement, we don't stop and say, actually, that's Māori and Pacifica. That's how they've been taught to show respect. We need to see past that too. So it's challenging what we view as like acceptable because we know that about the culture. Do we not know enough about these cultures to also see that that's part of how they've been raised?
Yeah, really good points. Joe, I want to come back to you again because you're a great example. You're inside a large organization. You're obviously an advocate and a huge voice for bringing more people in. But standard corporate onboarding is not necessarily well structured or shaped for people of different cultures. So how do you think, from a corporate and community standpoint, what does genuine holistic pastoral care look like for these young employees and to help them thrive?
Yeah, good question. And I think that's the question we should be asking ourselves is how do we get the best out of this person, out of this talent? And again, looking at that process end to end, and onboarding is a really important part of that. I think there's a couple of parts. One is having clear expectations up front. They're working in tech, corporate, wherever, there's high standards, and our colleagues have to meet the requirements of the place that they're working. But at the same time, we need to believe they can achieve that, and they're more than capable. So how do we make sure that we're getting the best out of those people? And I think that's where leadership is really important, and having people in leadership or mentoring and providing support from within the organization who get it and know how to get the best out of people and understand, what people bring in a cultural sense, what those behaviors look like, and the underlying beliefs that drive those kind of behaviors.
We talked a bit about, the organisations and bringing people into the organisation. I'd be keen to hear a little bit more about the actual interactions you had with the rangatahi panel. So Megan, can you just tell us a little bit more about who was on the panel? How did they get picked? And also talk, because I know you talked through, and it came through the report, about this getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and you've got some really good examples, like the story of Sina, on how these students use these lessons to transform their body language. I know I've loaded you up with a big question there, but give us a bit of a download on, the panel itself.
Of course. So starting from the beginning there, I know often when pilots go into into schools, they want a certain type of student, and the school does too, right? It looks statistically fantastic. But what I wanted was the student that turns up every day, but isn't the scholar, isn't getting all the prizes, just turns up and just needs an opportunity to be part of something and feel like they've got a space to grow, feel like they can actually achieve maybe more than they've been expected, or that they see others do, but they think they can never reach. And that's what we got through Pukekohe High. So we had about 10, 11 students, largely female with a small group of male, Māori and Pacifica, from all islands too, which I loved. I loved the variation that we got there, because they all came with very different but similar backgrounds. And essentially they came into the space, and put aside the fact that they're teenagers, it's a very sensitive space too, because they're so unsure. There's so much fear. There's so much whakamā there. But then add on the fact that they're teenagers, there's heaps of whakamā there. There's heaps of tension there. There's heaps of lacking of some of the other skills there. But they took me by surprise once they got comfortable. So we very quickly pivoted from focusing on what we assumed we needed, because we learned very quickly we were wrong. And we did a lot of work on that soft skill development. On self-confidence was a massive thing. The self-belief to say, oh, I could do this. The self-belief to say, oh, I could challenge what I'm being asked or expected to do, because I actually could achieve this. And the way we did that is put them through a lot of scenarios that was going to bring fear to the top of the table for them, and making them very much learn and ingrain and rewire the brain to say fear won't kill you. It's, you give things a shot, give it a try. You're always going to be applauded for trying, but you will miss out if you don't. So the way we did that, for a couple of examples, is making them do on-the-spot speeches about random topics, making them shut their eyes and describe an object in the room, and making their peers draw that object. It's all around communication, but also just the big thing I said, it's about getting over yourself. If you can get over yourself, nothing will get in your way as you grow up. You will always be willing to give things a shot. And so we had students go from lacking the ability to talk louder than a whisper to, by the end, challenge and openly ask questions confidently and loudly in a group environment with strangers. And that's just growth beyond expectation. And the pure example of that was Sina, who was a beautiful, beautiful girl, so quiet. She talked as a whisper. It wasn't ever louder than a whisper. And it took her a very long time to build that confidence. And she got there to the point where her peers would notice when just that level of volume slightly shifted. And by the time we took them around graduation day to be hosted by different spaces, the biggest shock to me is when she turned around in the elevator to you, Craig, and said, "Can I ask you a question?" And we all just stood with our mouths open, of all people who wants to ask a question. And I know you gave her a bit of banter, and I thought, will she get over that banter? And she did. And that's, again, an example of the fact that you give her a bit of challenge, which is that banter, and she overrid it, which she never would have done. She would never have asked a question in the first place. And she asked you, what makes you want to be part of work for Māori and Pacifica and help Māori and Pacifica with their opportunity? And she wasn't prepped on that question. She wasn't given that question. That purely came from her. And all of us just were stunned, because it was Sina. It was, of all people in the group, who had finally found a voice higher than a whisper, to sit there on the last day and challenge the CEO, overcome the banter, and still deliver her question and stare you in the eyes for the delivery. That was more than gold to not just me, but the whole group witnessing that. And that's what they had to learn. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because the more comfortable you are with giving things a try, the more comfortable you are with feeling that fear and doing it anyway, the further you're going to get in life. And that was the big focus with this rangatahi panel, and it has continued to give back to them.
I think that was one of my best days at work last year, was the day when the students came in. We gave them authentic exposure to spaces like BNZ. We took them to Google, Spark, Worldline, and I think I was really prepared. I mean, I talked to you afterwards, and I thought, oh, the kids must have been, well, when I say kids, I mean they're teenagers. I thought they'd be asleep on the train back out to Pukekohe. And you said, no, they were buzzing. They were buzzing. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that. What specific tangible gestures or changes or ways of connecting do you think this triggered to show them that actually there was space for them? in
I
a
think that,
corporate?
yeah, no, I think it was, they were full of nerves entering into it. And I could sense that. It was that fear of how I feel, will it be confirmed? And actually, from meeting you at the train station to then walking out and just starting to shed that fear, remembering everything that they've been taught and nurtured, remembering there was a safe space with myself and the kaiko there as well. They entered into these groups, starting with obviously BNZ. We shared food, which was a big thing because it brought that formality down. Having a kai together after meetings brought that formality down. They started to see themselves in these spaces, not just by seeing Māori and Pacifica in this space, seeing the fact that this is a space that offers more than what I assumed it offered. It offers that pastoral care, that inclusivity, that fun, that vibrancy, that belonging. And so I saw them starting to ask more questions of our host. I saw them getting more comfortable to laugh and to be themselves in that space versus be whakamā. I saw them starting to ask questions and take it really seriously. And by the end of it, I was like, they're going to be shattered because it's so much to take in. But on that train ride home, it was all vibes on. They were buzzing. It was like they'd been to a first concert or something. They were absolutely buzzing. And when I asked them, what are the words? Tell me some of the words again, unfiltered truth. How are you feeling? And it was words like appreciated. It was words like belonging. It was words like just buzzing. And there was words like relief. And I said, what do you mean relief? Relief that the day's over? And they said, no, relief that I felt good today. Relief that I felt included today. It was nothing to do with the day being over. It was relief that none of that fear stopped them and that the original perception wasn't the truth. Mm. And that was huge. Again, cherry on top.
Yeah, Joe, you were one of the hosts. I mean, what did you think about the day and the things that you did to help?
Yeah, and it was such a great day. And can I just say, I think Megan's personal approach and creating that safe space with students was, you could just see that. And I really, really loved that. And think those students were really lucky to have that experience. And I totally believe, like at BNZ, we've got some amazing talent. We've got awesome people working here. And I think getting those rangatahi out of their heads and into the actual space was a big part of that, and seeing people like themselves, people who are not much older than them, raised like them, talk like them, that they could relate to. I think that was a big part of breaking down some of those barriers, but also, like Megan said, just seeing parts of the way that they live actually play out in the workspace is super important. And that's the visual stuff, the language, the imagery, the kai. Yeah, it's all really important.
Right, I'm going to put you both on the spot now because we do want to see change, right? And we want to rethink about, how things work, how corporates assess transferable skills. So I go Megan first because I'll put her on the spot first. If there's one immediate systemic change you'd like to see made tomorrow, what would it be?
Yeah, for me, it would be recruitment because that's easy. It is honestly easy. It would be the recruitment process and unpicking it, and it would be giving and ensuring that those in charge of recruitment are given the support, the awhi and the encouragement to unpick what's always been normal. It's an easy win. It doesn't cost a lot of money.
Okay, Joe, what do you think?
Yeah. I think totally agree with that. And perhaps to add to that, because our kind of main challenges come from systemic barriers, from historical policies, systems that have been created without, people like us in mind. It would be like right from the start of any piece of mahi, any policy, product creation, whatever it is, ask yourselves, what's in this for our Māori Pacifica communities? So including that right at the beginning of all the mahi that happens.
Oh. Megan, what are you going to do this year for Te Ara Hihiko?
I'm glad you asked, Craig. So what are we and our wider member community going to do for Te Ara Hihiko this year? We're working on a couple of initiatives. One is we're hoping to get underway a new rangatahi panel, hopefully at Pukekohe High. And that rangatahi panel will hopefully be all wahine, Māori and Pacifica, because we want to deep dive again into giving them all those soft skills, but also all the gender challenges that comes with being a wahine Māori, a wahine Pacifica as well, because we know that's a massive gap within our sector too, not just being Māori and Pacifica, but being a wahine. So that's a big piece of work we want to get underway as well. And the other initiative we are looking at is hopefully being able to have a few of our member organisations partake in us having very confidential, very safe space hui with their Māori and Pacifica staff to ask once you're in or as you were onboarding or when you were being recruited, what do you think we need to change as part of your life journey within your organisation that could help all our member organisations reflect on it from recruitment right through to induction and right through to actually being there? How do we reduce that cultural burnout? How do we improve their experiences as Māori and Pacific within our spaces in a real positive light? So those are the two key initiatives we're hoping to achieve in 2026.
Well, as usual, it's been a real pleasure and a joy to speak to both of you. You're amazing people, both Megan and Joe. And, I love working with you, particularly in this mahi, but across other things. Now, I have this thing that I ask every time now. What are 2 books that you're reading, that you've read, that you'd recommend, people? It could be anything. Megan, do you want to go first?
It's a really rude question when you're a mother of a toddler, Craig.
Oh,
it's a
maybe
really
it's
rude
Bluey.
question.
Maybe just watch Bluey.
No, so the 2 books we're on repeat at current to avoid all catastrophic meltdowns is The Nighttime Train, which really is influential to the toddler genre of understanding how to get to sleep and stay asleep. And the other one is Nino, the Little Engine. And the moral of that story is little can do great things too. It's what you put your mind to. So those are my 2 puka that has been on repeat in this household.
They're probably the best books I've had recommended.
Well, a lot of stories, a lot of morals behind these children books.
Until Joe gives us her 2, of course.
As a parent who's coming out the other end and now has time to read grown-up books again, I am currently reading and really enjoying Dave Grohl's autobiography, The Storyteller. He's which I kind of didn't know either. So from the Foo Fighters.
Yep.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I wanted to read it because my son is kind of really just started down the path of music, and he's into rock, and so I needed to open my mind a bit. But it's a great story about finding your sense of identity, individuality, and leadership. But without it, it being a lecture about those things. So heaps of parallels to my life and work, and the second is Belonging by Owen Eastwood, which explores the fact that, we all have a tribal nature as human beings, whatever our cultural background, and how if we can create or get this right, it creates, high-performing teams.
Amazing. Awesome. Hey, I want to thank you both again for coming on. And if you're listening to this or watching this, thank you for joining us. You can read that report, The Unfiltered Truth, Building Courage, Dismantling Barriers, and Unlocking the Potential of Aotearoa's Rangatahi. That's on our website. Just go to the 2ans.org.nz, look under, I think it's Our Work, and you'll find Te Ara Hihiko Rangatahi panel report. It's all there for you, including a 1-page summary if you haven't got the time to read the full thing. This podcast, obviously, if you're listening or watching, there are multiple others that I've done previously. You can find those on our website as well. They're on our YouTube channel or any of the audio podcasts applications that you might be listening to. So once again, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Joe, and mā te wā.
Mā te wā, ka kite.
Ngā mihi.